The market was alive with chatter and the smell of spices clinging to the air. Ada stood by her stall, arranging yams and tomatoes, her hands moving almost on their own while her mind wandered. She kept glancing at the house across the narrow dirt road, the one with the yellow paint peeling at the corners. That house belonged to Nkechi, her neighbor. Everyone in the village knew Nkechi, mostly because of the way she carried herself, the confident smile that never seemed to fade, and the way men often paused to look her way. Ada forced herself to focus on her vegetables, but her eyes kept drifting back. Nkechi stepped out of her gate, her dress tight around her figure, her hair glinting in the weak sunlight. Ada noticed the way Nkechi's eyes scanned the market, and for a moment, something cold curled inside her chest. Nkechi waved at a man who was coming toward her, and Ada's stomach tightened. That man was Uche, Ada's husband. It wasn't that Ada hadn't noticed the looks before, the whispers in the market, or the way Nkechi seemed to appear at every chance, smiling at Uche. But today felt different. There was something in the way Nkechi leaned toward him, the laughter spilling from her lips, that made Ada's heart beat faster, unevenly. She forced herself to step back behind the stall, pretending to weigh tomatoes as if she wasn't staring at her own life unravel in front of her. Uche's voice carried over the market noise. Ada's heart skipped when she heard him laughing, a sound she had loved for years, but now it felt hollow. Nkechi was right there, brushing her fingers lightly against his arm, leaning in as if she owned every inch of his attention. Ada's hands trembled as she stacked the yams, trying to make the motion seem natural. The market felt smaller, the air thicker. Other people were moving around, but all Ada could see was them, the impossible scene of betrayal playing out in daylight. She had always trusted Uche, had always believed in their love, but now she felt a knot tighten in her chest that refused to loosen. And Nkechi, with her easy smile and perfect hair, seemed to have a power over him Ada couldn't understand. Ada left the stall early, pretending she had errands, her mind spinning. She walked past the corners where children played, past the elders chatting, past the women carrying baskets on their heads. Every step took her closer to home, yet she felt farther from everything she knew. Inside, she sank onto the floor, tears escaping despite herself. She remembered the first time Uche had kissed her hand, the soft words he had whispered under the night sky. Now it felt like a lie. That evening, Uche returned from the market, carrying a small bundle of yams and peppers, but Ada didn't meet his eyes. Nkechi had been at their gate earlier, he mentioned casually, and Ada could hear the admiration in his voice, the way he described her, the way he laughed when she joked. Ada nodded, saying nothing, her mouth dry, her fingers tight around the handle of the knife she was chopping onions with. Night fell, heavy and quiet, the kind that made every creak in the house sound louder. Ada lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining Nkechi's smile, imagining Uche leaning in, imagining herself erased from the world she had built with him. She wanted to scream, to fight, to change things, but she didn't. All she could do was lie there, heart pounding, mind spinning, wondering when the first blow would fall, and whether she could survive it. The next morning, the village was already alive again, children running barefoot across dusty paths, women calling out prices, men talking in low tones. Ada walked past Nkechi's house, her stomach tight. Nkechi was outside, chatting with someone, her laugh light and sharp. Ada swallowed hard, keeping her distance, yet she couldn't help noticing the way Uche's bicycle leaned near Nkechi's gate. The first real confrontation hadn't even happened yet, but Ada knew the storm was coming. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet part of her whispered that when it hit, nothing would be the same again. Ada woke with a heaviness that clung to her body. The morning sun pushed its way through the curtain, but she didn't feel the warmth. Uche had already gone, his side of the bed cold. She sat up slowly, staring at the pillow where his head had rested. The silence of the room pressed in on her, thick and suffocating. She tied her wrapper around her chest and stepped into the yard, listening to the faint sounds of roosters and the hum of people starting their day. But beneath those ordinary sounds was the echo of her fears from the night before. She boiled water, prepared pap, and set a tray for Uche's breakfast even though he was gone. The routine felt empty, like a play she was performing with no audience. Her hands moved but her mind was elsewhere, stuck on the image of him standing too close to Nkechi, laughing too freely, smiling too wide. As she sat with the untouched bowl in front of her, a knock came at the gate. Her stomach tightened. She knew even before she opened it. There was Nkechi, her neighbor, her so-called friend, with a smile that carried no shame. "Ada, good morning," Nkechi said, adjusting the scarf on her head. "I just wanted to ask if you have extra palm oil. The one I bought yesterday was not good at all." Ada's eyes lingered on her face, searching for something: remorse, guilt, hesitation, but all she saw was ease. That calm boldness stirred something sharp inside Ada. Still, she forced her voice steady. "Yes, I have," she replied and fetched a small bottle, placing it in Nkechi's hand. "Ah, thank you, my sister," Nkechi said warmly. "Uche greeted me earlier at the market. Such a kind man. You are lucky." The words landed like stones in Ada's chest. Nkechi knew exactly what she was doing, playing sweet on the outside while planting poison inside Ada's heart. Ada gave a tight smile and closed the gate, but once alone, she pressed her palms against the wood, her body shaking with the weight of anger and helplessness. Later that day, Ada returned to the market. She arranged her vegetables carefully, trying to act like nothing was wrong, but her eyes betrayed her, always searching for Uche. She saw him soon enough, laughing again, shoulders relaxed, his whole posture alive in a way she hadn't seen in their home for weeks. And next to him, of course, was Nkechi. Ada's chest tightened as if invisible hands were pressing hard against her ribs. She couldn't hear the voices of customers anymore, couldn't hear the bargaining or laughter around her. All she heard was their voices, blending, rising, softening, almost like a song. When Uche finally walked toward her stall, his face glowing with the joy of the encounter, Ada forced herself to smile. She handed him water, her fingers brushing his briefly. She wanted him to look at her the way he had just looked at Nkechi, but his eyes flickered quickly, distracted. "You look tired," he said, sipping from the cup. "Maybe you should go home and rest." She nodded slowly. She wanted to say, "I am tired because of you," but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she packed her basket and walked back home, each step heavier than the last. The house felt too big when she returned. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped together, her mind racing. She thought of the nights she and Uche had spent whispering about the future, the way he had promised to stand by her through storms. Now here was a storm, but he was holding someone else's hand through it. That evening, Ada cooked, but she cooked without care. The stew burned slightly, the rice clumped together. She didn't mind. She placed the food on the table, waiting, her heart pounding. When Uche arrived, his shirt smelled faintly of perfume that wasn't hers. "Where did you go today?" she asked quietly, keeping her eyes on the pot. "Market," he replied simply, avoiding her gaze. "With who?" she pressed, her voice trembling but controlled. "People," he said. Then he added, "Nkechi was there too." "Why do you ask?" Ada's chest heaved. "Because I see things, Uche. Do you think I am blind?" He set his spoon down, his jaw tightening. "Ada, don't start. Nkechi is just a neighbor. Stop making something out of nothing." But his tone betrayed him. It wasn't the voice of a man innocent of betrayal. It was the voice of a man caught between guilt and defiance. Ada lowered her eyes, swallowing the lump in her throat. That night, she cried quietly, careful not to wake him. Her tears soaked into the pillow, her body shaking with the ache of betrayal. Yet somewhere beneath the pain was a spark of determination. She wasn't going to sit still and watch her marriage crumble in silence. The following week, the whispers grew louder. Women in the market exchanged glances when Ada passed. Some lowered their voices, others didn't bother. She caught fragments of talk: Nkechi and Uche, always together. Ada must know by now, each word pierced her deeper. One afternoon, when she returned from fetching water, she saw something that froze her steps. Uche's bicycle was leaned again against Nkechi's gate. She stood there, her throat dry, the weight of the bucket digging into her hand. She wanted to march in, to drag him out, to scream until the whole village heard. But her legs wouldn't move. She stood rooted to the spot until tears blurred her vision. When Uche finally returned home that evening, Ada didn't ask him where he had been. She didn't need to. His silence said everything. She turned her face away when he tried to speak, and for the first time in their marriage, she refused to share his bed. The rift had opened wide now, too wide to ignore. Nkechi had stepped boldly into their lives, and Uche had let her. But Ada was not finished. Deep inside, something was shifting, growing stronger, sharper. She knew there was no turning back. The story was no longer about suspicion or whispers. It was about survival. And for Ada, survival meant more than just enduring. It meant reclaiming what was hers or watching it all fall apart in front of her eyes. That night was the longest Ada had ever lived through. She lay awake, her heart pounding in her ears, listening to Uche's steady breathing beside her. He had turned his back to her, and though they were only inches apart, he felt like a stranger lying in her bed. She stared at the ceiling until her eyes burned, wondering when he had stopped loving her, when Nkechi had slipped between them like a shadow. At dawn, Ada rose quietly, careful not to wake him. She tied her wrapper, fetched water, and began sweeping the compound. Her movements were slow but firm, each stroke of the broom an outlet for her frustration. She wanted to scream, to cry, to demand answers, but instead she pushed her pain into the ground, sweeping it with the dust. The village stirred awake around her. Children ran past, their laughter sharp and bright. Women passed with buckets balanced on their heads. Men gathered by the roadside, talking about farms and money. But Ada felt apart from it all. Her world was cracking while life outside moved as though nothing was wrong. When she returned inside, Uche was up. He sat at the table, chewing slowly, his face unreadable. Ada set down a bowl of pap for him and turned to wash dishes. The silence between them was loud. "You're quiet these days," Uche finally said, his voice calm but distant. Ada's hands froze in the water. She turned slowly, her eyes fixed on him. "What should I say, Uche? That my husband spends his time with my neighbor more than with me? That everyone is talking, laughing behind my back? What do you want me to say?" He looked away, his spoon clinking against the bowl. "You're overthinking. People talk too much. Nkechi is only a friend." "A friend?" Ada repeated, her voice trembling. "Then why does her perfume follow you into this house? Why is your bicycle always at her gate? Why is your smile wider with her than with me?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Uche pushed back his chair, his jaw tight. "I don't need to explain myself to you every minute. I am a man." Ada's lips parted, but no words came. She stared at him, realizing that the man she had trusted, the man she had built her life with, was slipping from her grasp. He picked up his bag and walked out without another word. The door slammed shut, and with it, something inside Ada broke. The day dragged painfully. Ada went to the market, but even selling vegetables felt meaningless. Her hands moved, but her mind was elsewhere. She caught Nkechi's figure across the rows of stalls, her bright dress, her loud laugh. Men turned to look at her, women whispered. And then, as if to drive the knife deeper, Ada saw Uche again by Nkechi's side, carrying her basket as if he belonged to her. Ada's vision blurred. She dropped the yam she was holding and turned away, gripping the edge of her stall to steady herself. Customers called to her, but their voices sounded far, as though she was underwater. All she could think was that her world was crumbling in public view, and she had no strength left to hide it. That evening, she went home early. She sat on the floor of her room, her hands covering her face. The walls felt like they were closing in, trapping her with her pain. She thought of her wedding day, of how Uche had lifted her veil with trembling hands, how he had promised her forever. She thought of the nights they had shared laughter under the moon, of the days they had worked side by side to build their small life. And now, all those memories felt like ashes, slipping through her fingers. When Uche came home, he didn't even meet her eyes. He dropped his bag, washed his hands, and ate quietly. Ada didn't speak. Her silence was heavy, deliberate. He finished his food and left the table without a word. Days turned into weeks, and the gap between them widened. Ada no longer reached for him at night. He no longer asked about her day. Their conversations became shallow, empty exchanges about food or errands. But the silence between them carried all the words they refused to say. The whispers in the village grew louder. Women pitied Ada, some openly, some behind her back. Men shook their heads, saying Uche had been blinded by Nkechi's beauty. Even children repeated things they overheard, their innocent voices cutting like knives. One afternoon, Ada's closest friend, Ifema, came to visit. She sat on the wooden bench outside, her eyes full of concern. "Ada, my sister, how long will you endure this? The whole village is talking. Nkechi is not even hiding it. She flaunts it as if it is her right." Ada's eyes filled with tears. "What do you want me to do, Ifema? Should I fight her? Should I drag Uche back with chains? He chose her. What power do I have?" "You are his wife," Ifema said firmly. "Don't let that woman take your home. Don't let her mock you in your own compound." Ada wiped her face, but the tears kept coming. She wanted to be strong, but strength felt like a faraway thing. Still, Ifema's words planted a seed inside her, a seed of fire, of defiance. That night, Ada waited for Uche. When he returned, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes tired, she stood in front of the door, blocking his way. "Uche," she said, her voice low but steady. "If you want Nkechi, go to her. But do not come back here pretending. Do not eat my food, do not sleep in my bed, do not call me your wife when another woman wears the smile that belongs to me." For the first time in weeks, Uche froze. His eyes met hers, and something flickered in them, guilt, maybe, or shame, or anger. He didn't answer. He walked past her into the room, but Ada knew her words had pierced him. She lay awake long after he slept, staring into the darkness, feeling the fire grow stronger inside her. This was no longer just about a husband's betrayal or a neighbor's wickedness. This was about Ada's dignity, her worth, her place in a world that was trying to strip everything from her. And deep in her chest, beneath the pain and fear, Ada knew one thing: the story was far from over. The storm was still gathering, and when it finally broke, the village would never forget. The days that followed Ada's bold words felt different, heavier, as if the air in the house itself carried tension. Uche still left early and returned late, but now there was no illusion of peace between them. Ada stopped pretending. She no longer prepared his favorite meals, no longer asked where he had been. When he sat at the table, she set food down without a word, her silence speaking louder than any confrontation. But silence can wound sharper than words, and Uche began to feel its weight. He would glance at her sometimes, expecting anger, maybe even tears, but what he found instead was a quiet resolve, a wall he could not climb. Meanwhile, Nkechi grew bolder. She no longer cared about whispers. She would laugh loudly in the market with Uche by her side, her hand brushing his arm as if she was already his wife. She wore new clothes, jewelry that glittered, perfumes that lingered. Every detail screamed possession, as though she was announcing to the world that she had taken what belonged to Ada. Ada endured it in silence, but inside her, storms clashed. She carried the weight of shame whenever she walked through the market. Women looked at her with pity, some with scorn, as if her husband's betrayal was her own failure. Men shook their heads, muttering that she had lost her grip on Uche. And children, too young to understand, teased with cruel innocence. Yet Ada held her head high. If tears came, they came only at night when no one could see. And each morning, she rose with her wrapper tied tightly, her face calm, her movements steady. She would not give Nkechi the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. One afternoon, While Ada was returning from the stream, she heard voices behind Nkechi's fence. She froze, water sloshing in her bucket. It was Uche's voice, low but warm, and Nkechi's laughter, light and sharp. Her hands trembled as she set the bucket down. She leaned closer to the fence, her heart thundering. "Why don't you leave her?" Nkechi's voice teased. "You spend more time here than in your own house. What are you waiting for?" There was a pause, then Uche's reply. "It's not so simple. She is still my wife." Nkechi laughed again, a laugh full of mockery. "Wife in name only. You love me, Uche. You know it. Let her go. She will survive." Ada staggered back from the fence, her breath shallow, her body shaking. She picked up the bucket and walked away quickly, but every step was heavier than the last. Each word she had heard played again and again in her mind until she felt like screaming. That evening, when Uche returned home, Ada watched him carefully. He avoided her gaze, ate his food quickly, and slipped into the room. Ada followed him, her heart racing. "Uche," she said softly. He froze, his shirt half unbuttoned. "I heard you," she continued, her voice breaking. "I heard you with her. You told her I am only your wife in name. Is that what I am to you now? A name? A shadow in your house?" Uche's lips parted, but no words came. Shame flickered across his face, but pride quickly replaced it. "You should not be listening to what does not concern you." Ada stepped closer, tears glistening in her eyes. "It does not concern me. I am your wife, Uche. I gave you my heart, my body, my years. And now I am nothing but a burden you cannot wait to cast aside. Tell me to my face, do you love her?" The silence stretched, painful and long. Finally, Uche looked away. "I don't know what I feel anymore." The words cut deeper than any blade. Ada pressed a hand against her chest, as if to hold her heart together. She turned slowly, leaving him standing in the room, and lay on the bed, her face buried in the pillow. She didn't cry this time. She had no tears left. The next day, Ifema came again. She found Ada sitting under the mango tree in the compound, her eyes vacant. "My sister," Ifema said gently, taking her hand. "You cannot let this continue. Nkechi is mocking you, the whole village is laughing, and your husband, he is losing himself. You must fight back." Ada shook her head slowly. "Fight how? If a man chooses shame over honor, what weapon can a woman use?" "Wisdom," Ifema whispered. "Patience. And strength. Nkechi thinks she has already won. But pride comes before a fall. Watch her. A woman who steals what belongs to another never ends well." Ada held on to those words, though doubt still gnawed at her heart. She returned to her stall in the market, selling her vegetables, nodding politely when people greeted her, ignoring the whispers. But she began to watch Nkechi carefully. Nkechi was beautiful, yes, but her beauty carried arrogance. She laughed too loudly, flaunted too much, as if daring the world to envy her. And Uche, poor, foolish Uche, followed her like a moth to flame, not realizing that flames consume. Weeks passed, and Ada noticed small cracks. Uche began returning home later and later, sometimes not at all. When he did, his clothes smelled faintly of palm wine, his eyes weary. Nkechi was pulling him deeper into her world, a world of indulgence and recklessness. One night, Uche stumbled into the compound, his steps uneven, his words slurred. Ada helped him inside, her face calm though her heart was heavy. She laid him on the bed, removed his shoes, and sat quietly by his side. He muttered something about Nkechi, words tangled with drink, and Ada realized the truth. Nkechi was not building him, she was breaking him. The next morning, Uche woke with a pounding head. Ada set a bowl of water before him without a word. He looked at her, his face clouded, and for a moment, shame crossed his eyes. But pride quickly buried it again. Meanwhile, the village grew restless. Some people began to whisper that Nkechi's charm was unnatural, that perhaps she had gone to places in the night, places where women sought powers to tie men's hearts. Others said it was only a matter of time before her pride destroyed her. Ada listened but said nothing. She kept her pain hidden, her dignity intact. She knew the story was not finished. A storm was building, and though it had already shaken her to the core, she sensed it had not yet reached its peak. Deep in her chest, beneath all the heartbreak, Ada began to feel something new. It was not just anger, not just grief, it was the beginning of a quiet, dangerous strength. A strength that waited, patient and steady, for the day it would be needed. The dry season wind carried dust across the village paths, swirling around feet and clinging to clothes. Ada walked slowly, her basket balanced against her hip, her thoughts weighing heavier than the yams she carried. Each day seemed longer than the last, each moment stretched thin by Uche's absence. He had become a ghost in their home, present in body, but gone in spirit. That evening, she prepared his food as usual. The aroma of egusi soup filled the air, but her hands moved without care, her heart not in it. She set the table, then sat quietly on the bench outside, waiting. Hours passed. Night fell. The sound of crickets rose, yet Uche did not return. Ada's eyes stayed on the road, her chest tight with both fear and anger. When the gate finally creaked open, she saw him stumble in, his shirt unbuttoned, his face weary, his steps unsteady. He smelled strongly of palm wine, and something else, perfume, sweet and sharp, one she knew too well. Nkechi's scent. Ada stood. Uche, where have you been? Her voice was calm, but beneath it was fire. He waved a hand, irritated. Don't start tonight. I am tired. Tired from what? From drinking? From lying in another woman's arms while I wait here like a fool? Uche's eyes darkened. Ada, mind your tongue. You forget who I am. Ada stepped closer, her tears burning but refusing to fall. I have not forgotten. You are my husband. The man I gave my youth to, the man I believed in. But tell me, what kind of husband abandons his home for a neighbor's bed? Silence filled the compound. For a moment, Uche looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, her strength, her fire. But pride was stronger than shame. He turned away, muttering, enough, and staggered into the room. Ada sank onto the bench, her body trembling. She wanted to scream into the night, to curse Nkechi's name until the stars shook, but instead she sat still, gripping her knees tightly. Her silence was not weakness, it was survival. The following days brought no peace. Nkechi flaunted her hold over Uche openly. She wore new wrappers, her hair adorned with beads, her laughter echoing through the market. Women whispered that Uche had begun spending money carelessly on her, buying her trinkets while Ada barely had enough to keep their home running. One morning, as Ada was laying out tomatoes at her stall, Nkechi walked past, swinging her hips, a smug smile on her face. She paused, bending slightly to pick a pepper from Ada's basket. These are fine, she said sweetly, holding it up. Uche must be proud to have a wife who works so hard. But then again, he is always with me, so perhaps he does not notice. Her words were like poison wrapped in honey. Ada stared at her, her jaw tight, her hands trembling against the table. For a moment, she imagined herself grabbing Nkechi's hair, dragging her through the dust in front of the entire market. But instead, she said nothing. She met Nkechi's eyes with calm, steady fire, then turned away to attend to a customer. The restraint cost her everything, but it also denied Nkechi the satisfaction of a reaction. That was Ada's strength, her silence that screamed louder than insults. But the village was not silent. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said Nkechi had gone to a herbalist to tie Uche's heart. Others claimed she bathed in charms at midnight. Children repeated stories they overheard, their words innocent but cruel. Everywhere Ada went, whispers followed her, clinging to her like shadows. At night, Ada prayed. She knelt on the mat, her forehead pressed to the ground, her tears soaking into the floor. God, see me, she whispered. Do not let my enemy laugh at my downfall. Fight for me, because my hands are weak. One night, as she prayed, Uche returned late again, drunk, his steps unsteady. He muttered Nkechi's name in his sleep, words slurred but clear enough. Ada sat by the bed, staring at him, her chest aching with betrayal. But as she watched, she noticed something else, his face pale, his body restless, as if a sickness was growing inside him. He tossed and turned, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool night air. Ada fetched a cloth, wiped his face gently, even though her heart screamed against it. She was still his wife, and duty ran deep in her blood. Yet as she cared for him, a bitter thought crept into her mind. It is not my hands he seeks when he is well, but it is my hands that comfort him when he falls. By morning, Uche looked worn, his eyes dull. He left without eating, avoiding her gaze. Ada watched him go, a knot tightening in her stomach. Something was shifting, she could feel it. The path Nkechi had dragged him onto was not leading to joy, it was leading to ruin. Soon, the cracks began to show. Uche's once strong body grew weaker. He tired easily, his steps slower, his laughter forced. In the market, Ada overheard people whispering that Nkechi's charm was beginning to eat him alive. Some said no man could share two hearts without one breaking. Ada said nothing, but she watched carefully. Each day, she saw more of Uche's decline. His pride kept him silent, but his body betrayed him. Nkechi still clung to him, but Ada noticed the slight shift in her eyes too, a flicker of impatience, a crack in her confidence. And Ada, though still hurting, began to feel a strange calm. She had been battered by betrayal, mocked by whispers, humiliated in public. But she sensed the storm turning. The same hand that had mocked her would soon tremble. The same mouth that had laughed would soon fall silent. Ada waited. She watched. And in her heart, she knew, what Nkechi had stolen was poisoned. And what is stolen with deceit never ends in peace. The rains had started, heavy and unrelenting, drumming on rooftops and flooding the narrow village paths. The air was damp, the ground soaked, and with each passing day, Ada's heart grew heavier as she watched her husband slip deeper into ruin. Uche, once strong and full of energy, now moved like a man carrying stones on his back. His shoulders slouched, his steps dragged, his face pale and drawn. Nights were the worst. He tossed restlessly in his sleep, muttering, groaning, his body drenched in sweat. Ada would sit by his side, torn between anger and pity. Her love for him had been scarred beyond recognition, yet her heart still broke watching him waste away. Nkechi, however, was not moved. She had grown restless. Ada saw it in the way she walked past their compound without her usual confidence. Her laughter in the market no longer rang as bright. People noticed, and whispers followed her wherever she went. One afternoon, Ada was returning from the stream when she saw them, Uche leaning weakly against Nkechi's gate, his body trembling, his face pale. Nkechi stood a little apart from him, her arms folded, her eyes sharp with irritation. "Why are you here again?" Nkechi snapped. "I told you, you cannot keep coming to me like this. I need you." Uche's voice was hoarse, barely carrying. "You need me?" Nkechi scoffed. "You are becoming a burden. Look at you. Always coughing, always weak. Is this what I fought for? A man who cannot even stand straight." Ada froze behind the corner, her heart pounding as she watched. Her husband, the man who had abandoned her for this woman, was now being rejected. The sight was both painful and strangely satisfying. "Don't say that," Uche whispered. He reached for her arm, but Nkechi pulled back sharply. "I don't want you here tonight," she said coldly. "Go back to your wife. At least she still has patience for you. I don't." And with that, she turned and walked into her compound, slamming the gate shut. Uche staggered, leaning against the wall for support. After a long moment, he began dragging himself home, his face etched with shame. Ada stepped quickly back, not wanting him to know she had seen everything. But inside her chest, a quiet storm raged. She wanted to scream, to ask him if he now understood the cost of betrayal. But she said nothing when he finally entered their compound, his head bowed, his steps heavy. That night, Uche barely touched his food. He sat silently, his eyes dark and hollow. Ada watched him, her heart torn. For months she had prayed for this day, the day Nkechi would show her true colors. And yet, now that it had come, she felt no triumph, only sorrow. Days passed, and Uche grew weaker. He coughed often, his voice hoarse, his body trembling. Ada cared for him quietly, cooking him light meals, fetching water, wiping his forehead when fever struck. But she did it not out of love, no, that love had been broken, but out of duty, and perhaps, pity. The village noticed his decline. Men shook their heads, women whispered, and even children pointed. Everyone knew the story now. Nkechi had stolen him, and now she was casting him aside like spoiled fruit. One morning, Ada went to the market. As she arranged her yams, she heard the women gossiping nearby. "Have you seen Nkechi lately?" one asked. "She no longer shines as before," another replied. "Her eyes are restless. They say misfortune is chasing her." "Misfortune? She brought it upon herself," a third said sharply. "A woman who takes another's husband will never know peace." Ada kept her head down, arranging her produce, but inside her, a spark flickered. She knew they were right. Nkechi's days of triumph were ending. That evening, Uche returned home early, his body shaking, his lips pale. He collapsed on the bench in the compound, clutching his chest. Ada rushed to his side, helping him inside. "Why are you doing this?" he whispered weakly. "Why are you still helping me, after everything?" Ada looked at him, her eyes steady. "Because I am your wife. Even if you forgot, I did not." Uche closed his eyes, tears slipping down his cheeks. For the first time in months, he broke. "I am sorry, Ada. I was blind. I was foolish. I thought Nkechi loved me, but she only loved herself." Ada's lips trembled, but she held back the tears. "You destroyed what we had, Uche. You threw me away for her. Sorry cannot mend what is already broken." He wept softly, his body shaking, and Ada sat beside him in silence. The next few weeks were a blur of sickness and whispers. Uche grew weaker, his strength fading quickly. Nkechi, on the other hand, was unraveling. She no longer smiled in the market, no longer walked with pride. People whispered that she was haunted by guilt, that strange misfortunes were falling upon her. One evening, as the rain poured heavily, a loud cry came from Nkechi's compound. Villagers rushed there, and Ada, too, stepped out, curiosity pulling her. She saw women gathered, their faces pale. Through the gate, she glimpsed Nkechi on the ground, writhing, her hands clutching her stomach, her screams piercing the night. "She is cursed," someone whispered. "The gods are punishing her." Ada's heart pounded. She watched as men carried Nkechi inside, her cries echoing long after the gate closed. The villagers murmured, shaking their heads. Some said it was sickness. Others said it was the price of betrayal. Ada returned to her compound, her mind heavy. She found Uche sitting on the bed, his face pale but his eyes alert. "What is happening?" he asked weakly. "She is suffering," Ada replied quietly. Uche lowered his head, shame washing over him. "Maybe it is what she deserves. But it is also what I deserve." Ada looked at him for a long moment. She wanted to agree, to tell him that both of them had invited this ruin. But she only sighed and said, "Rest. Tomorrow will reveal more than today." And deep in her chest, she knew this was not the end. The storm had not finished its work. Nkechi's downfall had only begun, and Uche's repentance had only just started. The village would see more before peace returned. The rains had softened into mist when the village woke to news that shook every compound. Nkechi was gone. The same woman who had strutted through the market, laughing loudly, was now a shadow buried by whispers. Her body had been found lifeless in her room, her face twisted in pain, her hands clutching at her chest as if she had wrestled with unseen hands. The story spread fast. Some said it was poison, others swore it was the gods punishing her for breaking a woman's home. A few claimed she had been struck down by the same charms she used to bind Uche, her greed backfiring and swallowing her whole. Whatever the truth was, one thing remained clear: Nketche's reign of mockery was over. That morning, Ada stood quietly at her stall, arranging peppers with steady hands. The market buzzed with gossip. Women clucked their tongues, men shook their heads, children whispered the tale like it was a folktale. Some cast secret glances at Ada, expecting her to smile or gloat. But Ada's face remained calm, unreadable. Inside her, the storm that had battered her heart was finally easing. Not joy, not triumph, but relief, a heavy stone lifted from her chest. Uche, however, wore his guilt like a second skin. He had barely spoken since the night Nketche's screams filled the air. When he heard the news of her death, his body crumpled. He sat on the bench in their compound for hours, staring at nothing, his lips moving silently. Ada watched him from a distance, her heart torn between pity and anger. That evening, he finally spoke. His voice was hoarse, weak. Ada, I brought shame to you. I mocked our marriage, chased shadows, and now, look what has happened. I destroyed everything with my own hands. Ada remained quiet for a long while, the only sound the steady drip of rain from the roof. Finally, she said, you destroyed us, yes. But you also destroyed yourself. What you chased was never real. A woman who laughs at another's tears cannot build you a home. Now you have seen. Tears rolled down Uche's cheeks, mixing with the rain that had blown onto his face. Will you ever forgive me? He whispered. Ada's chest tightened. She thought of the nights she had cried alone, of the shame she had endured in the market, of Nketche's smug smile. Forgiveness was not a gift she could hand out easily, not after the wounds carved so deep. She looked at him, her eyes steady. Forgiveness is not a word. It is time. If you want it, you must earn it with every breath you take from now. Uche lowered his head. For the first time, he did not argue. He only nodded. The village, too, shifted in the wake of Nketche's death. The women who once whispered now praised Ada for her strength. They admired the way she had carried herself without scandal, without violence, without giving Nketche the victory of public disgrace. Men shook their heads at Uche, using his fall as a warning to others. And children repeated the tale in hushed voices, adding their own twists, as if it were already a cautionary story woven into the fabric of the village. In the weeks that followed, Uche tried to rebuild. His body was still weak, but he rose early, fetching water, helping in the farm, trying to reclaim his dignity. He spoke less, worked more. Ada saw the effort, but she kept her heart guarded. Wounds heal slowly, and hers ran deep. One night, as the moonlight spilled into the compound, Uche sat beside Ada on the bench. The air was cool, the village quiet. He turned to her, his eyes heavy with regret. You once told me I was your whole world. And I threw that world away for nothing. If you never love me the same again, I will still stay by your side. I will still serve you until my last breath. Ada looked at him, her face softening. She thought of the man he once was, the man she had loved so deeply. She thought of the storm they had survived, of the woman who had tried to tear them apart and had paid with her life. Slowly, she reached out, resting her hand lightly on his. You broke me, Uche, she said quietly. But you are still here. And I am still here. Let us see if time can mend what pride destroyed. He gripped her hand, tears glistening in his eyes. For the first time in many months, Ada felt a fragile hope stir in her chest. Not joy, not certainty, but the beginning of healing. The story of Ada, Uche, and Nketche became more than gossip. It became a tale told around fires, a warning to women who mocked and men who strayed, a reminder that betrayal carries a price and pride never lasts. Ada walked through the market with her head high again, not because she had one, but because she had endured. And though the scars remained, she carried them with dignity, a living proof that storms may bend a woman, but they cannot break her spirit when she chooses to rise. What a journey this has been: betrayal, heartbreak, and the heavy price of pride. Ada's strength reminds us that no matter how fierce the storm, dignity and patience will always outlive deceit. Nkechi thought she had won, but in the end, she lost everything, even her own life. If you've followed this story to the very end, thank you for staying with us. Now it's your turn. Drop a comment telling us which country you're watching from and what the time says where you are right now. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another powerful tale like this one.